And you wanted to say something about Abraham.
Yeah.
Father Abraham.
So we got this email. We get email every week. And we got an email from some guy who, he was presented with this really strange apologetic. Basically that, the story of the binding of Isaac, where Abraham is instructed by God to take Isaac up to this mountaintop and sacrifice him because, God said so or something. Anyway, and so Abraham doesn't question this. He just does it. According to the Bible, he saddles his ass and he goes up to the mountain and he starts to do this thing. And then at the last minute, of course, God intervenes, according to the legend, and stops and he sacrifices a ram instead. Well, according to this weird apologetic, Abraham actually wasn't going on faith, that this was not a test of faith for Abraham, it was a test of reason. And Abraham knew that God wasn't actually going to make him sacrifice Isaac, and what he had to do was overcome his emotions surrounding this commandment to kill his child, and actually just go up there and bind Isaac and, act like he was going to do it. And then God said, no, never mind, do the ram instead.
But why would you have to overcome any emotions if you knew that something wasn't going to happen?
Well, exactly. Yeah, why would there be any kind of emotional thing? It would be like, the pretend sacrifices that you do at Halloween, where you're not actually like eviscerating somebody, you're just pretending for the people that may be observing. But my thought on that was that not only does this not make any sense, it also kind of highlights the fact that, at least on some level, Abraham thought this was something that his God would do. The fact that he didn't object to it, even in the case of Lot, where, God was going to basically destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and, Abraham was intervening on Lot's behalf, and actually on the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, saying, hey, if there's 50 righteous people, will you still do it? What about if there's 10 righteous people? What about 5? What about 1? Just 1.
Negotiate.
But he didn't do any of that stuff when it came to, kill your son. He just did it.
Is it just me, or every time we get into something like this where God's going to kill people or destroy people, and you try to point out kind of the absurdity or immorality of this, and the believers come back with well, these people were deserving of this. I have the He Had It Coming song from Chicago playing in my head on a loop. He had it coming.
Well, there's that, but this guy's not even claiming he had it coming. It's just that we've totally misunderstood this. And so not only do I think we didn't misunderstand it, and the fact that it highlights the fact that this is something they would have expected their God to order them to do at that time.
Yep.
Gods around there, plenty of gods ordered child sacrifice, so this wouldn't have been unusual. And so Yahweh apparently was no different than any other God that would have ordered a child sacrifice. But
now the bad counter-apologetic is, which I've heard from a number of atheists and everything else, is why would God need to test Abraham? Clearly God knows. And the easy answer to this is that wasn't the point. The purpose wasn't to test Abraham for God's benefit. The purpose was to test for Abraham's benefit. God already knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So but my take on this has always been that the one and only correct answer, if you believe God, and if the God that you know would never ask you to kill your kid, then if somebody comes to you and asks you to kill your kid, then it's clearly not God. And so it's depart from me, unclean spirit, for my God would never ask this.
Right.
And the fact that Abraham went ahead with this shows that Abraham had in his mind the idea that God could and would do this. And God rewarded that concept in Abraham's mind. And so now this person's writing to say, no, actually Abraham knew God wouldn't do this.
Which, and that was my other point, is that there's no scriptural support at all for this apologetic. None.
No,
at no point does it say, hey, Abraham knew the whole time, and God just had to get him to overcome this emotional objection, which there was no emotional objection.
Yeah, it's stupid. Here, let's pretend. Jen, wink, wink, I would like for you to bring your son over to our house and we will slaughter him in the backyard.
Screw you.
See, that's what the response would be.
Yeah.
But if Jen knows that I'm not serious, then she might wink back and play along, knowing we're not actually getting, what the hell is going on
Yeah.
here? All right, God, I'll kill him for you. I mean, there's no emotion. This is just absolutely horrible apologetic, and it's the type of thing we get when you begin with the idea that the Bible is true and good, and you run into complications and contradictions and absurdities. And so religion, the process of apologetics, does a tap dance to try to rationalize these things away. And I saw it when I did the debate in San Antonio, where we talked about slavery. And basically they would say, well, God was just trying to soften our views on slavery. So he knew he couldn't get rid of it outright, so he just kind of legislated it so that we would eventually get rid of it. No, he's God. If he can say, thou shalt not kill, and it's binding, then he can say, thou shalt not own another human being, and it's binding. Yeah. Well, this is we were talking about prisoners, and this was actually for their benefit.
Well, but correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a commandment in the alleged 10 Commandments that says thou shalt not commit adultery.
Yes.
And yet we still have adultery, but we don't have slavery anymore.
I know.
So go figure.
I don't know why it was so hard to get. Why is it that their God is so inept at communicating? I mean, this is the supreme ruler of the universe who's supposed to be infinitely more wise than we are, and yet somehow he completely fails to communicate things that we can communicate rather trivially. Hey, why is it wrong to own other people? Well, would you like to be owned? Oh, no. Well, cool. And if there's no guarantee that you're going to be the one who's in a position of owning rather than being owned, which is a better society, the one that prohibits owning other people or the one that allows it? Well, the one that prohibits it. Done.
Yeah.
Why is it that God can't communicate that way?
I don't know, because that seems like it would be a trivially easy thing for an omnipotent God to do.
Yeah. Plus, if this was even our confused misunderstanding of this, you'd think that God could clear this up, maybe in Bible 2.0, otherwise known as the New Testament.
Yeah.
And yet that doesn't happen. Jesus doesn't come along and say, hey, that stuff you thought we said about slavery, you guys got it wrong. This is what we actually meant. Instead, he said, as slaves, obey your masters. Which kind of seems to reinforce this even further.
Yeah.
This is, I don't get it. I don't understand why their God is stupider than we are. I mean, it seems to me that you've got this God who is not particularly bright, who is inept at communicating, that is petty and vengeful, and is it more plausible that this God actually exists, or that this is a reflection of the invention of the people who created him? And I think I'll go with the latter.
Yeah.
So there's bad apologetics all the way around, and that includes some responses from our side as well.
Yep.
I don't know. If you know why your God is so stupid, please feel free to go ahead and call in and explain it to us, because this whole thing about worship comes up. I wouldn't worship any being. I don't understand the need for it.
Yeah, I don't either.
I respect. Sure, I respect lots of people. I respect even some fictional characters, because the whole purpose of a fiction is to kind of portray a caricature of a real person, real qualities, and real people. I might even greatly respect and revere some people, but this idea of worship, this idea of dying to yourself in deference to somebody else, I don't see any value in doing that. But I definitely don't see any reason to do it to somebody who is more stupid, more immoral. I mean, it seems to me that the only justification for it is fear. God can squash you like a bug. Fear is the beginning of wisdom. Fear the Lord. And then, of course, there's that verse that says, in love there is no fear. So that's potentially another contradiction in your book. I don't know. But if you've got the answers, by all means, pick up the phone and let us know.